Hello and welcome to the No Drama Dharma podcast for the Ghent Center for Contemplative Traditions. Today, I invite you wholeheartedly to follow our discussion on tea. Does tea help meditation? Does tea shape meditation? Is tea necessary? Is tea useless? So today we have our specialist, Jin Choi, from the University of Ghent and a great tea lover who owns a tea store in Munich, Germany. I very much welcome you to follow our discussion and to see what we can discover about the use of tea in different Asian cultures and the description of tea in text associated with Buddhist meditation, and to see how tea falls into context. So, how about tea? The only specialist I know for tea in the matter of tea as well as tea in Buddhist scripture. So it's actually a great pleasure to have you on the podcast. It's something I think falling asleep in meditation is a big concern for meditators.
Yeah, it is true. And also it's in Yogacara text, and it's also one of the warnings. So also like meditators, practitioners have to worry about eating too much when you're alone, and also like falling asleep lethargic. So we all know, if you have any experience in meditation practice, or even just simple reading or studying or trying to work. So fighting with sleepiness is the biggest issue. But the coffee, a lot of people use coffee, and also as you get older, you realize the side effects of coffee more. So for some people, coffee works great to a certain extent, but many like people who are more sensitive to the caffeine dose, or they have more sensitive body types, the coffee is too overwhelming, and then they turn to tea. But I also think it's not for everyone too. So there are certain type of people who can't even take tea at all. So that caffeine level is also hard. So I'm not saying tea is for like an alternative for everybody who can't take coffee, but tea comes with much less side effects, I would say. And it's common consensus among, especially like, it's a little biased opinion, but among the tea lovers, we always say like tea is the healthiest addiction human could have.
I can, how you say, I can stand by your word when it concerns to the side effects of coffee, because I'm a heavy coffee drinker and my heartburn
Oh, you
if
get
it
heartburn.
gives a quick answer to, to the
Oh,
coffee consumption if it gets too high. Though I mean, it's a question, of course, in Asian societies, there was no coffee back then. The introduction of coffee was pretty late. So I think, of course, the only beverage that had like a stimulating or awakening effect in these cultural areas might just have been tea at this time. And the purpose to stay awake is quite evident.
one big difference between coffee and tea. So tea comes with caffeine, but also it's only one of the three major elements in tea. So there
Mhm.
is caffeine, which makes a bitter taste, but it's just like a pack of antioxidants. And a third one is theanine. You probably heard of
Mhm.
it. Onion, you can nowadays you can get it as a tablet, but it can be only found in tea plant or in one type of specific mushroom. But that is very tiny amount. So the theanine tea is the only natural source you can take in a lot. So theanine does, it really calms you down, and then if you have enough theanine, you have this like a happy, and the tea drinkers call it tea high. You
Mhm.
this very happy status. And I see it every day when I do tea ceremony. During my tea ceremony, people drink tea 2-3 hours, uh, three types of tea in a row. And in the beginning, usually like German people, they are like a rigid and like a little nervous, and they don't really show any emotions in the beginning. But down the road, they have like a red cheeks, and then like giggling a lot, and then really sharing a lot. So that's what theanine does in our system.
Mm.
So, and another role of this catechin, the bitter substance, it prevents the too active performance of caffeine in our system. So it regulates the speed of caffeine working. So
Mm-hmm.
you get crash because caffeine works, and then like you crash. But tea caffeine works really gradually, and then the combination of theanine and uh, tea polyphenol really holds you up, like a really like a prevents a too much a spike up, and like a
Mm-hmm.
but gradual in the stimulation, and then it keeps you hold it like this, like a same status.
Mm.
That's why the meditators and the students really find great benefit in it.
Yeah,
So
I see the point because generally coffee makes me wake up very well, but it doesn't last as long.
yeah. So, and one of the young kids, started calling me nerd collector. So this in these tea meetings I usually have, there are a lot of the academics, the PhD students in neuroscience, like physics, and or all these science people. They are really fascinated by this art of tea, and then the effect of tea in their system. And then, so I think. Of course, like it's sophisticated and cultured people usually get drawn this kind of exotic culture, but at the same time, it's type of really like a material culture you can really like absorb in your system, and then see the benefit in real life. So that's why um, modern day tea connoisseurship not necessarily has to do with the really like a spiritual or religious the purpose, but without people realizing it, they actively use it for their concentration, and
Mm-hmm.
also for meditation as well. For me, I don't do any like a deep static meditation, but my meditation, I think, is this kind of performing tea ceremony for people, or practicing yoga, hatha yoga. And the tea also makes great difference, really. If I drink certain type of tea before my yoga, I concentrate really well. And also coffee, I think, does certain similar um, role right before your the workout, right? So
Yeah,
the it can boost you up your thing, and then coffee, but tea does it too. So you can really get benefit of tea for your, the mental practice or physical practice as well.
yeah. Thanks. I can copy paste this in.
Thank you. Look forward to it. You have to send me the link.
It goes along when you do intensive meditation practice in the Buddhist style. Often it comes also with the reduction of sleep at night. Many of the retreat programs are actually cutting short on sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we did retreat, we practiced until 10:30 at night,
Mm-hmm.
and then you still need to go to the bathroom and get ready for bed, and then you wake up at 4:30 again. So it makes slightly less than 6 hours. And accumulating, that means you have a heavy tendency of dozing off whenever you can. And in between recitations and ceremonies, once you're active, of course, you're engaged. And then you have these phases where you just sit and do
Mm-hmm.
nothing and just be present. Then, of course, it might lead to extended stretches where the be present aspect doesn't lead to overly much presence, but rather than the body takes the sleep it demands.
Yes, in a way. So I, knowing all that, and I also like it's the same kind of, we have the same similar context in the Korean Buddhist monks, you know, when they, especially Chan monks or Zen monks, or we call them Sun Buddhist monks, and they also do like overnight practice and then getting up really early morning every day. It's really hard. I have a like a more like a total respect for the ancient monks in India who never had any contact with tea culture. So tea actually started really getting provided and getting becoming popular and common during the British occupation. Before that, there's no record of tea culture except one very tiny local place which used tea as a medicine, just Assam area. In a way, the Buddha himself never had a hint of tea. So it's amazing that he accomplished like a really deepest level of awakening just by, you know, just pushing it. Any chemical support. But I think the reason why this Chan tradition or the meditation tradition got really widely spread in China thanks to this amazing drinks of Chinese culture.
I mean, you scratched already quite a few things. I mean, that's the question of intoxicants and stimulants and also the love of tea. And suddenly you have something you really cherish and cultivate with all in opposition to all this asceticism. But especially, I wonder if one even raises the word of intoxicants from a certain perspective, because it generally does have, in the Buddhist context, a Vinaya context, it does have, to my understanding, it does have a connotation of dulling the senses or of manipulating the senses into either shutting off awareness, thus shutting off the cause for enlightenment, but at the same time also maybe in inducing mind states that are unnatural, that are different from the regular experience that would be in the present. I don't see both occurring from when drinking a tea. So maybe, I don't know if you have ever seen anything in the scriptures or if in Chan Buddhist cultures there was such a discussion that the effects of tea might be falling in this category or not?
The thing with Chan's tradition, they never left any thick documents. It's just an episodes of people, because their motto is not, they are against scriptures, any type of. So the whole point of their tradition is just sit down and meditate, and this kind of very spontaneous question and answer sessions between the master and the disciple. Those episodes are later recorded, but so they were not like prolific writers at all. So it's hard to find hints of tea effects, or they never really focus on like singing about the great effects of to a greater extent. But there are many monks who used the tea as a part of their everyday practice. In many of these episodes, tea appears. So there's a famous monk, for example, the name doesn't come pop up in my head, but is known for just always just say, have a cup of tea, no matter what, whoever. Have you ever heard the story?
No.
So in Zen tradition, as another culture among these monks, is they always travel looking for like new masters, or they hire like a level masters. So they were always wandering around. And when they visit some new temple, they always agreed with they have to always say hi to the headmaster. And there's usually headmasters are the highest ranking master, and so the episode goes like one visiting monk came by, and then the headmaster asked a question. So where are you from? And then he said, "Oh, I came from this village." And then he just offered a cup of tea. So he just said, "Oh, okay, have a cup of tea." But actually, what he meant is where he's coming from is more like ontological questions. So where are you coming from? Like not just where you're from, which village or which country you're from. It's like where this human being is coming from, kind of ultimate question. And the second monk came by, and then he asked the same question. So he said something in philosophical and understanding his question, but he also said again, just please have a cup of tea. And then his disciple, looking all these like different the situations, he was wondering why he only says like, "Oh, please have a cup of tea." And then he asked him, "Oh, so why, no matter what level of monks are coming, you ask the same question? Why would you just say have a cup of tea?" And then he says, "Just have a cup of tea," like that. So this story like really kind of captures the Zen ideas. So no matter whether you're dumb or smart, understand this philosophical question, or how you smart enough to answer, either good or bad. So no matter what we can do is our human body just like being in this moment. So drinking tea behavior kind of really like anchoring down the anybody who are any level and show the what you can do at this moment right now. So it's really like linked with the Zen teaching. But at the same time, it really shows that tea drinking was a really common habit and custom and etiquette in this era, and which is a medieval China. Yeah.
I mean, that extends also to, I think, a quite large part of the material culture where you had like very fine china, very fine baskets to keep your tea. And also, I guess it wasn't only like any kind of tea, like was there not a union of like also the cherishing of like high quality teas, special teas at the same time with attribute the qualities to the tea's effects? Or would it be any kind of tea, as long as this was tea?
The interesting thing is the habit of drinking, calling tea when it's not made from tea plants. First of all, like strictly speaking or academically, so tea has to come from this certain plant called Camellia sinensis. So already this the scientific name really alludes that it's from China. So sinensis just means China. So the camellia type of has to do with chameleon, the flower, like a tree. So it's one of this family and descendants of this family group. And then, but this tea plant was more of a giant trees rather than bushes. So they all come with the caffeine. So strictly speaking, we can't call herbal teas teas, but we all do it in the West, and that's common practice in Asia as well. So anything made from the non tea plants, such as like mugwort tea is tea, and any flowery tea is also tea. So anything warm drink, calling it tea is a common practice in throughout the East. And so going back to our context, so the Song Dynasty, when it comes to Song Dynasty, around 10th to 12th century in China. So that's the time the Chan Buddhism got really bloomed. And then it was not only tea, but also the medical concoction. The was really widely popular in Buddhist monastery as well. So for like very healthy drinks were really largely promoted among Buddhist monks, and it was circulated within the Buddhist community in general, not just the tea.
They were not interchangeable. They would not assign medical properties to the tea itself, or?
But I think this kind of the development of healthy drinks or warm drinks was the popular in Buddhist monastery because Buddhist monks were not allowed to eat during the night, and in a way to fight the hunger and also to take
Mm-hmm.
their body part. So the tea was one alternative. I think as time goes by, they probably realize, it's my assumption, but realize that they also need something else because drinking tea, anything too much is, bad for you. Tea is at least healthier and then comes with less side effect. But even ancient medical document warns about the side effects of tea. Giving could give you diarrhea if you drink too much, and it's too much, and then can give you stomach pain and so forth. Especially, it's not really recommended to drink like too much tea in an empty stomach as well. So that's what Buddhist monks have been doing to a certain period.
And the tea was always, or is still always, just tea plant and water, no milk, no sugar.
Um, Interestingly, in the beginning, in the very first book written about tea was comes out in the 8th century, and then there he criticized that the common practice of people who are mixing tea with other plants or nuts, and so it's and taking as a kanji form. With other condiments. That was a common practice. And then there is a certain part of the tea culture still stays like that. So you're mixing with a lot of nuts and dried fruits, and then
Mm-hmm.
and drink it more of a like a really fulfilling meal, like a substitute.
Yeah.
But so from 8th centuries, he kind of made the textbook for tea, and then he kind of encyclopedic the document. And there he said tea itself is amazing. The plant we should just enjoy as the way it is. And then this kind of pure method of enjoying tea continues until today. So in Chinese, it's not common to mix with milk or sugar or lemon, something like that, especially when it comes to premium teas. But ironically, the younger generations, and they are forgetting their own tradition. They are more geared, turned towards like coffee culture. So even no matter Chinese or Taiwanese, the younger generations, they prefer like a bubble teas mixed with milk
Ah, yeah.
and some like a bubble.
Or the upscale matcha latte.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. I was thinking of the Tibetan tradition of drinking tea that is like this almost soup-like concoction that is very strong tea from China, sold in bricks, and this tea gets mixed up with a lot of butter and salt, and it becomes actually like a very nourishing soup-like drink that entire Tibet was depending on
Yes.
until maybe until today. And I know many Tibetans who are like really having this as a staple of their daily diet. Funnily, there is a discussion. There's certain practices. Tibetan monks were quite relaxed about the rules of eating after lunch because it was very cold. And I think very quickly the monastic tradition in itself saw that in order to maintain a healthy body in these severe conditions, you can't just eat very little because you will have nothing to produce heat. So they had this tradition of drinking a lot of very hot tea, very hot, and same maybe as in Mongolia. But at the same time, they were also eating in the afternoons, except certain highly disciplined monks and nuns. And especially in the context of the fasting practice of the Nyungne Avalokiteshvara practice, this is a 2-day cycle. And at the first day, you do a lot of prayers and a lot of prostrations. And it's mainly a chanting practice and a fasting practice. So you eat until lunch on the first day, eat breakfast and lunch. And then after that, you're only allowed to consume liquids like tea. And there was a big discussion going on until today, how much you can put in the tea
Yeah.
that still stays tea, And I remember myself when doing it, when you get like super hungry, of course, you would like to at least have a big dollop of butter and some cream in it or anything that's rich and maybe a few spoons of sugar. But generally then, depending on the setting that you're into, actually there's only tea and water or just a tiny sip of milk to give you the illusion that it would be more nourishing.
Yeah. I actually had a very interesting conversation with a Tibetan student in Leipzig last summer, and then she was telling me, so younger generations, also younger Tibetan generations who was born not in Tibet and Dharamsala, their preference for tea is changing. So,
Yeah.
and also their body type, also they can't take too much fat like their uh,
Yeah.
the grandparents' generation was like that. So she told me like her grandfather just not is not even tea, just used to just drink the melted yak butter, the 1 liter of it, just like gulping down every day
Yeah.
to get energy for like a labor he has to do. And it's in completely like a different body type as well, I think. But the younger people, they tend to make a little thinner. They don't put too much butter, and
It's
some of them don't even like the butter tea at all.
I have a funny one about that. 20 years ago, I started studying oral Tibetan in Kathmandu, and we were placed, or we had ourselves placed in Tibetan families to like really engage in conversation all day long. That was our idea, at least. And so it was a friend of mine, Gelek, and myself, and we would like every day meet to have classes. And he was living in a very wealthy Tibetan family.
Mhm.
And they would always serve him and like help him anything he needed. They were readily available, really wonderful hosts. And so every day we would meet to our class, have our like personal tutoring by a Tibetan teacher. And day upon day, he would like doze off and get more and more tired and like really. And suddenly he would just like halfway fall over while sitting and just be more and more sleepy. I say, "What's wrong with you, guy? What's up?" And then we discussed further, and he said, "Yeah, they were actually having this kind of butter tea you just described. They were having a really high class blender, so they could emulsify huge amounts of butter, which
Mm.
they could pay because they were fairly well off, and they would make this extremely rich buttery tea.
Mhm.
And because they were such good hosts, they would always refill his cup. He would be in his room. They would a few times a day. They would pass by and just say, you want more tea?" And he's a very kind guy too. So he would never say no. So in fact, his liver was on strike.
Oh
Yeah,
no.
because in Kathmandu in this hot weather, like his liver was like embalmed with all this butter grease. So he needed to lay off a few weeks of the butter tea to regain his energy.
So if you look around the tea culture around the globe, it's really, really different how people take their tea, and it's really tells their cultural and environmental context. So it has to be changing. And then even in China, in alone, just even within the tea connoisseur group who only drinks tea as the brewing in tea water, there is a trend. There's constantly innovative elements. So that's why it's exciting about. That's why I named the talk in Leipzig as it's a tradition and innovation in a cup. So
Hmm.
cup of tea, how you take it, how you prepare it, really includes all the history of the tea, and then also reflects the current trend and then people's need and or niche at the moment.
Yeah, actually, something I just wanted to add is I've never seen any connotation of Tibetan culture relying upon tea as a stimulant. I mean, not consciously. I mean, I think it has never, at least I've never seen a source discussing the benefits of tea upon meditation. But the whole nation was and is tea loving. They were even trading those tea bricks. They were the currency. They were
Yes.
more important as a currency than the coins.
And then if you look at the Chinese size documents, also the first paper money was invented because of this trade between Tibet and China, because
Hmm.
the amount of tea And then the length of their trade time was so long and so big, they started writing down the dates and then a month
Mm-hmm.
things, and it became the beginning of their paper money, actually. And then, of course, this tea trade became one of the until Song and all the way to Ming and Qing dynasty, and one of the biggest income source for Chinese government. It's really biggest impact, actually. And Tibetan side, of course, it's more of a became the real just part of their lives, not just the stimulants for monks. But that was also true for Chinese side as well. It's not just like reserved for monks for meditation, but it was that culture got really spread, and everybody was drinking tea. And actually, it was Tibet. The Atisha, when Atisha came, there is a record. They saying Atisha, when Atisha finally arrived, and then this great Indian guru arrived in Tibet, and Tibetan monks, of course, offered him this, the tea, and then there is a scene that he tries this tea, and then he was so amazed and asked what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So he never had such kind of
Yeah.
yes before.
Yeah, so we're going, like, just for the listeners, we are in the 11th, 12th century when the second wave of import of Buddhism to Tibet started. And Atisha was a very prominent figure in teaching what later became the Kadampa school. Yeah, I also remember for Kakamans, he once discussed a part of text with me that he found really curious, of a Sakya Lama in the 15th century, Kunga Dorjok, who was actually singing about the benefits of this wonderful tea. And it didn't seem to be the tea plant that they imported from China, but seemed to be a local brew of any kind of herb. And we were really wondering how much in these border regions in southern Tibet also brewing of certain herbs has pertained in this time. I've not seen much of this in the present.
And then they also call it cha.
Yes, but with an addition, and by the context, because he praises that it's growing in the area, and he praises that it has the properties of the surrounding environment, and that it kind of condenses the joy of the environment of the mountainous area. That led us to the understanding that it wasn't really the imported tea from China they were all drinking.
Yeah, I mean tea plant. I think now in modern days, Tibet. So there is more and more tea farms are getting started. As far as I know, there is no real tea plant or tea farming
Yeah.
culture in ancient India.
No, I don't think either. And this was well before the British came and before the British started planting, and there might have been an import from the southern hemisphere to the slightly more northern parts of the Himalayas. So it predates this.
So the same kind of common practice of calling any warm drinks or beneficial drink
Yeah,
is already also starting there.
yeah. But when you were in Leipzig the last time, you actually did a wonderful tea ceremony for us so that we could have a look at the tea ceremony. This is kind of something I'm intrigued about. What's the impact on, or what's the position of the tea ceremony within Buddhist ceremonial life, within monastery life, or what part does it take? What's the reserved slot for it? Does it have a slot? Or does tea ceremony only live outside of the monasteries?
So the first tea ceremony documented in Buddhist monastery was around 9th, 10th century during Song Dynasty, where the most elite or most delicate tea type was the powder, which is known as matcha as from Japan, but it started from Song Dynasty's the very fancy tea culture, went over to Japan, and then just the reserved as the way it is. And then during this time, Song Dynasty, like I said, this Chan Buddhist was really, really at its peak. And then one of this really biggest Chan Center, was located in Hangzhou nowadays, called Jingshan Temple. So they had a custom of offering tea in a certain way to their prominent guests. It could be donors or royal family as sponsors visiting, or prominent monks visiting, and they had a special way of offering tea. So, in a way, if you think about the ceremony itself, it's something, any kind. It doesn't have to be necessarily tea. The Bedouins in the desert, they had a coffee ceremony. So it's nice. It's ceremonies in a way the codified behavior so that participants doesn't feel awkward. So they know what's going to happen, and then certain steps, and then we do this out of showing, and we're putting enough effort and the time and all the preparation and all, and then we show our gratitude or the celebratory occasions in this special manner. So that's the, in a way, the could be like easy way of defining ceremony. So they started codifying this type of ceremony so that this procedure, they probably have to do it a lot in this giant monastery. So everybody could follow this procedure. So in a way, it wasn't very like we think for holy meditational purpose, but the whole process, if you look at it closely, you really have to focus what you're doing, and you really have to focus on the guest's reaction. And so whole setting itself could be the practice itself. Which is really interesting. So as a person who regularly offers tea ceremony for people, it's completely different mindset when I just do casual tastings. So I always prepare beforehand what I would offer and make the menu, and then think about the procedure, think about the proper snacks, and when to bring out the snack to make their experience the valuable. So it's really not only the people who are enjoying the serene atmosphere, the person, the host, it's the whole action or whole period of including preparation and then cleaning up. Its whole setting is it could be practice itself. I think the mindset about tea ceremony went over to Japan, and then it, in a way, it bloomed in with the mixed with the samurai culture, their warrior culture. To my mind, the Japanese tea ceremony becomes too much of a political tool down the road, and then not necessarily has to have the Buddhist connotation, and later more of a political, or also like the very Japanese unique cultural and social settings of the time. So from Chinese or Korean point of view, the Japanese tea ceremony is very, very strict. And they even count how many steps you walk towards a certain, and they really make the room to a certain size where it should be happen, what are the procedures. It's a lot more complicated and strict. And then the people who are trying to learn this method, they have to practice over and over again, and still gets criticized that you're not enough. In a way, the world of perfection.
Yeah.
So much for my taste, it's focused on too much of outer elements, whereas the Chinese and Korean tea culture, we more focus on the actually drinking behavior or the taste and aroma of the drinks itself, whereas in Japanese, they really focus on the behavior itself.
Yeah. But are there then, when you say Japanese and Chinese traditions of drinking tea, focusing on the behavior, then are there precise instructions of how to practice this tea ceremony internally? What's your mind state? How to slip into the role of performing and receiving the tea ceremony? Are there precise indications, or is this more
Yes,
learning by doing?
The spirit, like I said when I was talking about the beginning of tea ceremony in China during Song Dynasty, so and also whole procedure of presenting it in a serene atmosphere is there in Japan as well. But if you start really practicing this kind of tea school studies, they really really focus on how many times you have to fold the tea towel, in which direction is different from school to school, and how many steps. And even for guests, there are certain moments you could say about tea, or it's really like in a way very restricted atmosphere. I think for many people who hated this kind of culture, or like driven away from this kind of culture, was against this kind of too formalized setting, because then you forget about how wonderful tea is, and you can't really freely express how you like the tea and how you enjoy the tea. There could be many different ways of enjoying tea, but when you strictly refine, they limit the possibility, and you're kind of stuck there. So in a way, I see the point. So to perfect this kind of method, to do it perfectly without any mistake, serves a certain purpose, and it goes also and in line with the original spirit. But outcome is like too standard. You get obsessed with the standard method and
Yeah.
standard way of, even standard taste of the tea. So there is not so much varieties within the, like if matcha is matcha. There could be different grades and different taste based on the location of the garden, on how the master makes, but it's not so varied compared to Chinese, or the Chinese tea kinds, which is like divided into 6 different categories, and then the way how they prepare is completely different from one genre to another. So in a way, the Chinese tea ceremony culture, I have to start from again, going back,
Hmm.
sorry, we're back and forth,
Yeah.
has more possibility, and then open for the more innovative method down the road.
Mm.
And in fact, actually, when this kind of the brick tea culture, so the powder tea culture in Song Dynasty was still made from tea bricks.
Mm.
And then those brick tea culture got banned during Ming Dynasty, because the first emperor of Ming, who was the member of rebellions against the Mongolians. So he wasn't from an elite, the rich, background. So he did understand the agony of people who produce these fancy teas. So he banned this fancy cake tea, and then from that's why all the tribute teas started come in the form of loose leaf tea now, how the way we
Hmm.
enjoy nowadays. But this culture also got infused into Japan through one Zen tradition called Oboku Shule, Oboku school. It's one type of the Chan tradition. These monks, or the last generations of Ming Dynasty, when right before they got collapsed by Qing, and then they brought in a lot of this loose leaf tea culture, and then all of the monks were known for being great artists. Not only the tea experts, but they were calligraphies. They were the great painters and so forth. This great Ming Dynasty asset, along with tea, Ming Dynasty tea culture came in through this one temple in Nagasaki, and then they started actually the sencha tradition, so which is loose leaf tea, not the
Hmm.
tea anymore. But so sencha tradition now, they also offer the very, like a rigid, in my mind, type of ceremony. They copying the matcha tradition, but the beginning of the sencha idea was not about the whole complicated rules and how you do the proper things or not. It's more about really enjoying the loose leaf tea in a friendly atmosphere. So that's more really closer to the Chinese style.
So this kind of highlights a little bit more the hospitability aspect and the enjoyment aspect.
We have to understand with its context. So from our point of view, and also you being completely out of Asian, culture, and out of Japanese context, it feels too rigid and too like cold in a way. But I think it made sense at the time, and it was a very special period. In the 10th, 11th century in Japan was going through a really chaotic period. And then a certain moment, it was a really war period, and everybody, and this the bakufu, or this warrior clans, when they were really rising, it's nobody knows what's going to happen. They're always carrying weapons, and they're ready to die any moment. And then the series of natural disasters happen, especially around this capital area in Kyoto, and all of a sudden, 1/3 of population has disappeared. And imagine when you just wake up one day, and then really big part of your life is gone. Family or friends are gone. Then people think about this, the very first element of what Buddha said. Nothing's permanent. And then there is already great movement. The Zen Buddhist philosophy is widely popular because people just experience it to the core every day. And then there's this attitude of focusing on this moment because you don't know what's going to happen. So this is only what you can do. And this anything do, ending with do, like kendo or hanado, or like a flower arranging skills or swordmanship or calligraphy. So people started really obsessed with this kind of the art of doing things, really practicing the being at the moment kind of thing. So this was really prevalent right before this monk Eisai brought this Song Dynasty culture to Japan. And then, so this also the shogun of the time was the sponsor of these trips of Buddhist monks to go to the China, and then he was known to be really like alcoholic. And this SI, when he came back from Song with this tea, and he made a bowl of tea for him, and it immediately cured the shogun. Then he encouraged the monk to write the very first tea book in Japan. And it's really like emphasizing not only the tea practice itself, but really focusing on the health benefits of tea. So it's kind of going around, and tea wasn't necessarily only healthy tonic around the Song time anymore. It was a really common drinks, or common, the stimulants for monks, and also common leisure drink for people. So nobody was emphasizing health benefits anymore. But when it came to Japan, and especially these shoguns, like a reaction to it immediately cured his hangover. So they promoted the foreign drink as a really healthy ones, which Japanese people lack of, especially like a bitter taste. And then there's one part of this book, tea book written by this monk, says the Japanese diet lack of bitter taste, which is good for health, the heart condition. But Chinese people drink tea all the time, so they have relatively less heart problems. But Japanese always suffer from heart issues, and we are too weak and not healthy enough, so we should drink more tea, something like that. That was the motto of this very first tea book. So it's interesting. So not always tea is combined with, it's a great tool for meditation only. It always brings and emphasizes health benefit.
I can see when I was hanging out at your place, you could serve me quite a lot of teas. You could have not served me that many coffees. I could not have drank 10 espressi with you. That wouldn't have worked.
I mean, matcha is just one bowl of tea. It's different. But this matcha practice, or powder tea practice, already in Ming Dynasty is already the forgotten tradition. So loose leaf tea, and then especially the Chinese tea ceremony usually circle around this oolong tea culture. It started with so oolong tea was only produced in the southern area, and then the Song dynasty is a really delicate way of making powder tea. Their technique and the roasting techniques, and then the fine way of treating the material and the rolling the tea leaves for the better aroma really like accumulated to oolong tea produced down the road. And around 14th, 15th century, first type of oolong tea was made. And unlike other type of tea, this really emphasized on the aroma, amazing aroma and amazing taste. And you have to infuse in a certain way. So in order to enjoy this specially made tea, special way of brewing tea technique is developed. That's the beginning of the modern, commonly known as Kung Fu tea ceremony. This Kung Fu word is exactly the same as Kung Fu, know very well. But if you think about it, Kung Fu is not actually the name for martial arts. So the specific martial arts name is Wushu or Tai Chi or Qigong. Kung Fu is just the way how you train it. So in culture, anything Kung Fu is Cantonese pronunciation. So Kung Fu is the Mandarin pronunciation. Anything Kung Fu style means it's a way of perfecting your skill, investing a lot of time and effort. Could be the tea brewing technique. It could be the training, the martial arts, or it could be the dumpling making techniques. The arts could be the object of Kung Fu style. So this specific style was evolved around oolong tea tradition. And actually, there's an interesting record. The northern government officer visiting southern part, and he records that in this region, people drink tea in a very comical way, and they put teas in a like orange-sized pot, very small pot, and then pour over and over again and drink in a tiny, tiny walnut-sized cup. And we don't do this in the northern area. So it shows that this Kung Fu style or the oolong tea tradition really only circulated in a certain region called Fujian in Guangdong, the southern part of China. And then these people were immigrated to Taiwan. And while China was busy with the Cultural Revolution and going through, and a lot of really like nice the cultural the activities are really got weakened and forgotten and everything, including the tea culture, which was considered as high culture and looked down upon during this period. Taiwan was enjoying this great economical bloom. And interestingly, tea culture always blooms when the society is stable and also people have enough money to enjoy.
Yeah.
That was the time, 70s and 80s in Taiwan. And then they wanted to improve this Kung Fu style, which was very, simple in the beginning. There was only pot and 3 cups. That was all. But they wanted to do something more complicated like the Japanese do. But the matcha tradition is completely different. But sencha also is same like loose leaf tea. Sencha ceremony, if you look at the sencha ceremony in Japan, they use a lot of utensils. So some of them, these Taiwanese tea merchants adopted it and then infused into their oolong tea tradition. And then new styles of Kung Fu cha with the complicated like smelling cups and the pitcher and so forth, this started getting invented. And then when the China opened the market after 1980s, these big hands merchant who really initiated this kind of new tea style, they opened back in mainland China and then spread this newly invented style all over China. So it's in a way, if you look at the history of tea ceremony, it came from China and then really bloomed in a certain way in Japan, but came back and infused in a different way along with the oolong tea tradition, and then went back to China. Now it's the standard all over the world.
Is there any time connotation? Because it's kind of performance enhancing when we get back to the meditation contemplation part. But have you ever seen quotes like "drink more tea and you'll practice better"? Like the more tea you drink, the better it gets, or
I don't think they read the exact same part, but it just came into the really they melted into the Chinese culture already from the Tang Dynasty on. And before Tang Dynasty, which is 8th century, 8th, 9th century, the tea was only just a local drink. And then it was only got popular and really spread around the whole country along with Buddhism. So it was Buddhist monks who, one unique character about Buddhist monks' life is that they are very mobile. And then way the tea culture could spread really widely because they're always, going somewhere, traveling, and so forth. It came from Buddhist context and also a lot of Tang poetries. Literates, they were the second group who received this culture. And when they sing about tea, and they always describe the serene environment of Buddhist temples, the serene environment. It always kind of hand in hand. So the tea already became the symbol of Buddhist monasterial, the meditational practice, and a lot of description of the pointing tea. Have you ever made matcha?
no, me not. I've looked at people doing it, and as much as I can see, most people in modern day matcha don't really do much of what I thought would be matcha doing. But otherwise, no, I've never acquired the paraphernalia for getting into the matcha game.
Unlike the first generation tea, which was just basically boiling the tea powder in the boiling water, in Song Dynasty, this became in a way ceremonial. And then the interesting stage, the most important stage is putting the powder, well sifted powders into the bowl, and you have to pour the water, but very, very carefully. So this whole method is called pointing tea tradition. Pointing tea tradition. So this, and there is one poem kind of symbolizing this moment, capturing this moment as pointing tea, or pointing of samadhi. In a way, this action of pouring tea very carefully so that, if you pour any liquids to the powder, it can splash. So you really have to focus. And then the tea connoisseurs of this period really, they writing down which angle the tea pitcher should look like, and how much speed and amount or temperature of water you should put into this powder to make the perfect foam you could enjoy. So this kind of delicate connoisseurship and also the meditational tradition really went hand in hand. So you not only get the fuel to practice your meditation, but also the action itself is part of your meditational practice. So that already was well described in Song Dynasty poems.
That's a really interesting point. Is this fusion of doing things that are kind of common things, but with meditative awareness as enhancement or as to go along with the sitting practice. And we covered really a lot on tea, and you gave us so many hints on how to get a broader perspective of what tea can mean to people.
The tea culture comes with a lot of very interesting elements, and I think it's still academically not fully covered. So I think my next goal is to establish more better structure of this great culture and commodity that many people can easily understand and access.
I get where your fascination is coming from. Thank you so much, Jin.
Thank you for having me.